Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live event on innovative acoustic solutions enhancing interior environments. I'm Gurbir Brar, marketing manager here at Hush Acoustics, and I'm super excited to host today's live event, which is going to be packed with value. For more information on our upcoming events, be sure to check out the webinar page on our website, and you can find the link in the comments below. So do check it out. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of today's event. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions you might have. And I would also love to know, where are you tuning in from? So is it LinkedIn or Instagram? Let me know in the comments. And it's always great to see which platform you're using to connect with us. So now let's just dive into the content. So whether you're working on a healthcare facility with strict requirements on, or designing a hybrid workplace needing privacy and noise control, the insights you gain today will change how you approach your projects and interior design. So first up, let me introduce our amazing guest, Kayla. She is a registered interior designer with a wealth of experience in creating spaces that are both beautiful and functional. Kayla, please tell us a bit more about yourself and your background.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this today and be able to talk about acoustics. They're so important. So as Gerber mentioned, I'm a registered interior designer and I'm located in Regina, Saskatchewan here in Canada. So on that note, again, if you're commenting on where you're tuning in from, also let us know where you're located. I think we're all probably in different time zones. So I'm going to have coffee while we're doing this. Some of you might be on water, but anyways, I am really excited to talk about this. I've got a lot of experience in a variety of sectors. We don't do one style of design. We kind of touch everything. So I work for 1080 Architecture, Planning and Interiors here in Regina, Saskatchewan. We're an architectural firm that also does, of course, interior design and planning. So I'm looking forward to sharing information with you based on experiences and things that we've really seen integrated into spaces that make a difference, and hopefully provide you with some knowledge and value today that you can take with you and integrate into your projects. I had a previous career in healthcare prior to my career in interior design. So I have a little bit of a multifaceted knowledge base, especially when it comes to implementing acoustics into a high infection control environment.
Thank you, Kayla. Really excited to have you here. And next up, I have Carl Bradford. He is design manager here at Hush Acoustics. Carl, could you please introduce yourself and share what you do here?
Yeah, thank you, Gabir. It is very awesome to be part of this event today. So here at Hush Acoustics, we want to change your world by creating an interior ambience that will enable focus and improve well-being wherever people are interacting. And it's great to have Kayla on board because we are very passionate about working with the A&D communities to help solve any acoustical challenges, as well as visually enhance spaces using the acoustical products that we design and manufacture here in Canada. Thanks, Kabir.
Perfect. Thank you both. It's a pleasure to have you here for this live event. So without any further ado, let's just dive right into the questions. And I'm going to start with you, Kayla. Since we're talking about innovative acoustic solutions and enhancing interior environments, what are some acoustic treatment applications that can be integrated into interior spaces that provide both visual and acoustic enhancement?
Yeah, so in terms of acoustic treatments, there's such a large variety of products out there. Hush has so many wonderful products. So if you're not familiar with acoustics in general and the treatments that might be available, I do encourage you to visit Hush's website, and it'll really guide you through what is available. But there's so many things you can do, anything from acoustic panels on walls, space dividers, especially, for example, in a hybrid work environment where you want a visual but also a little bit of acoustical separation that adds a visual flair and a visual element to the space. Ceiling clouds, ceiling acoustical beams, lighting, acoustical lighting, of course, and just really anywhere that you could apply a surface treatment to, you can do it with acoustics. And anywhere that you could have a ceiling feature, you can do that with acoustics. And of course, the products are so vast, but also as well as in your workstation assemblies and how those components come together, having acoustic paneling to separate spaces and workstation placements is another way to do that through a furniture vendor as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. And I'm gonna ask the same question to Carl here, if you can address that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. So as Kayla had mentioned about acoustic lighting, now having lighting in the room, typically it's in the prime location for acoustical impact. So getting that combination between the two does give you a very good and effective way to get this acoustic treatment integrated into your environment. That is going to give that enhancement, because obviously when you have lighting, you're highlighting areas, you're drawing attention to them, but you're also adding clarity. So to do this both visually and acoustically does have a great impact. And also the beam products that were mentioned, again, when you can create that false canopy over any given area, you're adding texture using our products as well that have the natural finishes such as the wood grain looks. Yeah, you can bring these natural elements into these spaces to create that high acoustic performance. Very easily integrated.
Thank you, Carl. And I'm gonna go back to Kayla now. And my next question is, when designing a space, what are some key areas where acoustics should be a priority to ensure that the space functions well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll start off by saying that it really depends on what other treatments are happening in a space. But typically key areas would be corridors. A lot of the time now in spaces that are designed kind of regardless of the sector, we see a lot of high open concept ceilings, a lot of hard surface flooring. It's a little bit more resilient and more durable, but corridors for sure, especially where you have an exposed open ceiling grid or hard flooring versus carpet, that'll really help bring that percussion down as you're walking through and muffle some conversation and sort of assist with creating less of that echo as you're going through a corridor. And again, it's not only acoustics that will improve this. It's kind of all the things involved in the space, but that is a common area. It also, by placing acoustics in a corridor, it provides a passive wayfinding element as well. So if you're trying to direct a path of travel, especially when we're designing in a world where inclusive and accessible design is so important, this is a really easy way to do that. Again, so high ceiling spaces, especially over workstations or really active spaces where there is going to be more noise than typical or more noise than a quiet area, adding those acoustic treatments will really help address that. And then of course, something especially post-COVID is meeting rooms, because virtual meetings have become a standard. We're doing less in person, or maybe, it's more even now, but I think we've all identified that there's a lot of space, time-saving elements to doing virtual meetings and efficiencies there. So they're happening all the time, and meeting rooms are being designed to support virtual meetings. So meeting rooms especially, and depending on the room and depending on, again, what's happening in the space, things like wall treatments and ceiling treatments or acoustic lighting to help absorb some of that sound and assist with reducing that feedback that you're going to get on a virtual call. And in pair with that, phone rooms. I think many of you are probably very familiar with phone booth rooms that are a furniture system that you can buy prefabricated, and they're usually pretty acoustically sound. But often what we do in corporate offices or in a lot of design that require phone rooms is we construct them with drywall partitions, and then they're treated with an acoustic treatment on the walls, ceilings, and things like that. So it really depends on what is the space being used for and how much acoustic treatment is required and how much noise are you trying to mitigate or improve.
Yeah, thank you. There are a couple of different areas that acoustics could be applied. And you were talking previously about healthcare, right? So in healthcare environments, how should we consider acoustics, especially with the need of strict infection control?
Yeah. So obviously healthcare there's a variety of healthcare facilities. Some of them are treatment based or procedure based and some that are not. So I think the first step is to understand the facility. What is the type of treatment? What are the type of patients? Are there immune compromised patients? If you're working in a space or a facility that is, seeing mostly cancer patients, we know that they're often going to be immune compromised, especially going through chemotherapy and treatment for that. So infection control protocols are very high in those types of facilities, and any exposure to viruses or bacterias are very impactful to those low immunity patients. So understanding the patients and really taking the time to know what that impact is really important. And then, of course, in those facilities that need to be highly cleanable, you want to avoid putting acoustics on areas that can be touched. So wall surfaces. And this is where it really depends on the acoustic treatment. There is wipeable acoustic treatments, antimicrobial and bleach cleanable finishes for acoustics. But if you're using the typical kind of PET recycled content acoustic products that are so common and they're so beautiful, and often quite cost effective and reasonable for a budget, that's something you want to consider. You want to look at an appropriate acoustic treatment for those facilities. And then if you are using the typical PET recycled product, having it kind of up and away from areas of touch. So sealing spaces, and also though, having a discussion with facilities, because though we might feel that, we have some clouds and a high open ceiling space in a cancer center, ultimately they still will house bacteria and things like that. And facilities keeps these centers very, very clean. So it's really a conversation with facilities and the owner to determine their comfort level and their cleaning procedures, to determine if it's suitable. So really doing the information gathering prior to specifying the acoustics to make sure the applications are appropriate. Of course, in healthcare facilities that are a little bit less treatment based and more exam based, you can get away with things like wall treatments and things like that. So maybe a cosmetic surgical center where there's no procedures happening, it's consultations. That is more almost an office space than a healthcare facility offering treatment outside the facility. So understanding that for sure.
Interesting. And you did mention budget and 60% PET acoustics. I want to kind of dive into that. So for those on a budget, what are some cost-effective ways to improve acoustics of a space?
Yeah, so there's so many ways that you can integrate acoustic treatment that isn't often it's perceived as it's going to be expensive. And of course, it's the way that you approach it, how much detail, the products that you're specifying. And of course, we're going to use Hush as an example. There's such a vast variety of products that Hush offers, and they're all so beautiful. But typically, the more detailed, as a rule, the more detailed and complex the pieces that you're looking at get, the larger that they get, naturally just kind of realizing they're going to increase in cost. But really simple ways that are probably the most budget friendly, and of course, jump in at any time, but wall panels. So Hushes, for example, they're 4x8 wall panels. You can order them in a sheet. You can order them in their stock patterns. You can also have them custom cut a pattern. I've done that a number of times in projects where we've provided a CAD file for cutting out that pattern specific that we've customized into that panel. It's a really cost-effective way, and that can be suspended from the ceiling as a room divider. On a project last year, we had used Hush panels with a custom cut pattern, and then airlines suspended them from the ceilings and then mounted them to a custom millwork piece. So they became an acoustic, but also visual separation between some spaces in a Montessori school. Ceiling clouds, simple shaped ceiling clouds are also a very economical approach to acoustics. They're beautiful. Kind of the smaller standard sizes and shapes are economical. Again, as you get larger and you run into adding seams because they are bigger, the cost increases, but still very economical. And then selecting from stocked products and patterns, their standard colors, and then avoid customization. So anything's possible at a cost. And Hush has done some absolutely beautiful custom things, but understanding the client budget and knowing if there's the budget to customize or if you need to stay within the stocked options. The beautiful thing is that they've launched their Luxe color line, which I think is a small cost increase, but not large enough that it would break the budget. And it really opens up the color opportunities that you can utilize for different products. So those I would say are probably the key things. And then also consider the entire space. Where are acoustics actually required? Do you have carpet versus hard surface flooring? Is there what is the ceiling type? Is it open ceiling or is there ACT ceiling tile? And if you are specifying ACT ceiling tile, using a high CRC NRC product is going to supplement with that. So if you've got carpet on the floor and a high quality ceiling tile, maybe you're looking to supplement with something on the walls just to help with a little bit of percussion. And it could be that this is in a meeting room. So some wall panels might be appropriate there, but it really is looking at the space and determining what is the need and how you don't have to go overboard. And I think we have a question about this later, but if you're ever in doubt, leaning on Hush and their services to do acoustical analysis to understand what are you looking for and what are you trying to improve, and making sure that you're not spending the budget on acoustics that might actually not make a whole lot of an impact.
Yeah, thank you. Such in depth. And since we're already speaking on budgets, how do you approach discussing acoustic treatments early on and the design process to ensure that it's aligning with the client's budget?
Yeah, that's also a really, really good question. I think we all, as interior designers, architects, this is something we run into probably almost on every project is budget. It's really important to have the conversation early on in the project, particularly during the schematic design when budgets are being put together on the design end. So maybe you've done schematic, you've been to site, you've identified the existing conditions, and I'm going to use a renovation, for example, because a new build is a little bit more, you're able to identify things right from the beginning of where you're going to need things. But in renovations, it's important. Clients will often have a budget, but it hasn't considered some things that likely need to be integrated into the space. So right away in schematic, identifying, does the client, are you recommending an open ceiling? And are they really on board with that? And they really want that. Having the conversation about applying some budget to acoustic treatment and why. It's really about having the conversation and educating the client. I think our job as design professionals is to deliver the information to clients because they don't work in the industry. And sometimes you will work with somebody who's very fluent in it, but often you're going to need to make sure that they understand the value in the investment. And usually, if you're delivering the right information at the right time, they see the value in it. And people usually are okay spending money when there's value. If you're framing it in a sense that it appears or it feels to them like it's an aesthetic component, you're likely not going to get buy-in. So really making sure that you're up to speed with your technical knowledge and information, as well as just generally being able to speak their language. So it's a good opportunity in terms of the programming to have that conversation and not have it at the end when you're near completion of your construction drawings. Design development is done. It's not the right time, because then you're going back to the client when you've already done a Class D budget to put in front of them, and you're saying, well, I didn't think of this, but you should probably have $5,000 or $10,000 for acoustics, based on just a high level number. And of course, it could be less or more than that, depending on how large the space is and the needs. But it doesn't go over well when you have to slide that in at the end, when especially they've often had to take that back to decision makers for money and budget. So that's the biggest thing. It really is important to make sure that they see value in working with a design professional as well. So in turn, bringing those things to the table early on allows them to identify the value that they're paying a design professional to be a part of their project. It builds trust, and it also establishes the expectations of the performance and the function of a space. So they're under the understanding that their meeting room is going to be improved because acoustics have been thought about. Their phone rooms are going to be improved because acoustics have been thought about. Their employees are going to be happier because the open ceiling space above them isn't echoing because there's acoustics above them. So they really are going to see the value in you as a design professional. And really just, again, with that technical knowledge, emphasizing the importance of acoustics in those areas of concerns, and talking to them about in a high level enough approach that they understand it, because they don't speak the language that design professionals do. Talking to them about wall assemblies. What is your partition assembly? And telling them why that partition, if you do not insulate it from meeting room to meeting room, is going to be problematic, even if you put acoustic treatment in. And again, that's where you continue building that trust.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. And I feel that this question is also relevant to Carl. So I'm going to bring him up here and ask the same question, that how do you approach discussing acoustic treatments early on in the design process to ensure that it aligns with the client's budget?
Yeah, thank you. So there's two very important points in here. One is when you bring acoustics in early on in the project, it is much more efficient, especially like as Kayla was speaking on, when you are working on a new project, for example, as opposed to a renovation. But it's very important to get a clear understanding of that. And then secondly, is to have, yes, that clear understanding of the requirement for that space. Now, the way that Hush will take this and work with this is through our acoustical analysis capabilities. So what this means is we take the client's budget, we take the client's requirements for that space, and we can fabricate a solution that combines those two elements together. We can, with our acoustical analysis, we can do virtual simulations, we can do sound testing virtually in that space, and have a very, very accurate understanding of what the outcomes will be based on the different product mixes. Now, being able to change where we place the products in the room and the type of products used, like Kayla was speaking of, as soon as items are, let's say, customized and have more detail to them, yeah, they might be a little bit more on the visual enhancement side, but maybe slightly out of line for the super budget conscious project, where now that we have this ability to tailor these products and try them virtually in a space, give it a very, very thorough analysis, there's, let's say, it removes the surprise element out of the project, as well as giving us the ability to make modifications, make changes until it's at the perfect level for the customer between the acoustic performance and their budget. So yeah, it's very important to understand this and then have this conversation as early as possible in the project between the customer, the architect, the designer, and then our team here at Hush to perform this acoustical analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. It's really insightful. And we're now roughly halfway through our event. And I want to remind everyone that your questions are a very important part of this discussion. So if you have any questions or thought, this is the time to actually post those questions in the chat. And moving forward, Kayla, another question is that what should we do if after we install the acoustic treatments and the results are not what we expected?
So I think this is a great question following Carl's comments on their acoustical analysis that they offer. I think when in doubt, especially if you're less familiar with acoustic treatment, it's important to utilize those services, and also lean on your reps, lean on the manufacturers to get the information you need prior to finalizing specifications so that you understand the needs. That said, it's very, very important to, as a part of the conversation with the client about acoustics, talking about the expectations and the expected performance. The one term that gets utilized all the time and probably should be eliminated from design in general just is soundproofing. There is, of course, a way to get an entirely acoustically soundproofed room with concrete walls, basically. I'm sure most of everybody on the call today is familiar with STC ratings, and even at the highest STC reading, you're looking at an incredibly complex partition and components to that assembly, to how it connects to the floor and the ceiling and all of those things. So the word soundproofing, and I've heard it from clients utilized, we want our offices to be soundproof, or we want our meeting room or our phone room to be soundproof because we're having confidential conversations. That's an opportunity to educate the client on what does soundproof actually mean and what is their expectation. So often a good approach is walking them through an STC rating chart. What does an STC 35 give you versus an STC 52? And there's some really great charts, honestly, even just online, that outline that information to what's audible at 35 and what's audible at 52 and 65. So those things are perfect opportunities to lead into the conversation of what is your actual expectation? Do you want an office where from office to office, you can't hear audible conversation, but you might be able to hear muffled voice? Because often what happens too, especially in a renovation, you're sometimes limited by the existing conditions. One standard approach to ensuring that an office, for example, we'll use that as an example, has improved acoustics from probably what it had when you started with. A lot of existing construction has partitions built to the ACT grid and tile. It doesn't extend beyond that because it's an economical way to put walls up and divide space. When you're going in, if it's a gut renovation, immediately the first thing that you should do is specify a wall assembly that is, of course, insulated, rock wool insulation, for example, for that acoustic performance value. And then it should extend right to the underside of structure and be completely sealed. But having the conversation on what is their expectation, because often when they're saying soundproof, they don't know what they're not looking for full no sound transfer, but they just want it to be better than what they currently have and not be able to hear information from room to room. So outlining the expectation from the beginning and educating them is a perfect way to mitigate that. And then it also controls expectations so that when the project's complete, they're not walking into the office and having their coworker go to the office next to them and yelling at each other to see if they can hear each other. Again, walking through the STC chart will really give them a full understanding of what that result will be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think educating the client and also making sure that they know what can they expect can really eliminate disappointments after the install. And before I jump into the next question, I just want to confirm if you have any visuals that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, I just trying to think here. Pull up the presentation. I put a couple images together. I think we're probably kind of into the weeds with some technical information now, but we can kind of scale back and talk about those quickly. Just share my screen and we'll make sure. All right, can you see that there?
I cannot. But it's okay. We can jump into the next question. I can bring them up later on. No problem.
Sure, we can do some imagery at the end there.
No problem. And yes, so next question I have for you is, how crucial are wall assemblies and details in achieving the desired acoustic results?
So basically what I had sort of spoken to already about the partitions and how those assemblies are constructed is probably the most important element. So again, partitions, interior partitions to the underside of structure, making sure that there's appropriate insulation, selecting your wall assembly based on the STC rating that you're looking to achieve. So there's no real standard. It's if you want a 35 or a 40 or a 52 or a 65, it's going to be a wider partition, the higher STC, or you're going to need resilient channels, or there's ways to offset studs. So stud spacing will assist with some of that. Really understanding the partition though, and its assembly is really important. Another thing is areas of weakness. So receptacles and switches in partitions. You can have an entirely insulated partition that goes to the underside of structure, but if there's no acoustical control at your weak points, so your receptacle switches, your mechanical systems, you're going to have sound transfer. So things like quiet putty at receptacles and switches really assist with adding that acoustical treatment at those voids. And as well as when you're working with your mechanical team on designing the mechanical systems, of course, it's a chicken and an egg. Sometimes it's how does the mechanical system need to be run to be economical with budget? And is there any structure in the way of doing it a different way? What are all the elements that are impacting it? But the ducts that run from room to room often should always be angled as they enter another room. So what that does is the sound that's going to go through a diffuser is going to stop as soon as that duct changes direction. If you've got a duct running through 4 office spaces and dropping into each office space with a diffuser for heating and cooling purposes, you are going to hear a lot of conversation that's going to carry through that duct and drop down into the office, and it'll get less as it travels towards the last office. But that is a really easy way to, in advance, think about how are the acoustics going to perform at those weak points, because you can do the acoustical treatment and the wall assembly correctly. But if you got the weak points, especially in those building systems, it's going to be something that is going to be really challenging to mitigate later and expensive.
Yeah.
I think just trying to think if there's anything else. I think there's, glass walls are another big one. We obviously see a lot of glass walls and doors utilized in interior spaces, especially when we're talking about the right to light and sharing light for interior working stations and offices. When maybe there's only one wall of windows, we really want to emphasize and utilize those windows to their fullest potential. The issue with doing glass fronts on offices or any glass walls is you're then opening up kind of another can of worms in terms of acoustics. You're not going to get the same acoustic performance with a glass wall as you will with drywall. There is different types of glass, laminated, tempered. A laminated glass, a 12 millimeter laminated glass is going to be a better performance than a 10 millimeter tempered. So there's different performances of glass. So whichever wall manufacturer that you're working with, whether it's, dirt or Falk built or whichever Technion, having the conversation with the individuals that are really knowledgeable in that to understand what the expected performance is. And then do you need to go to double glazing? So things like boardrooms, that might be an appropriate place, but it always comes down to budget because glass is more expensive than drywall. And so really outlining the expectation that you're not going to get full acoustic kind of control from one side to another with glass, unless you go usually to a dual glazing partition.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just curious because even in our office, we have hybrid workspaces, and you did mention phone booths earlier. So, in these hybrid workspaces, like phone booth rooms for calls and virtual meetings, how do you address acoustics?
Well, I think it's really sort of what I spoke to before. Is it's really dependent on what is the function. A phone room that is being utilized for phone calls versus a virtual meeting. There's a little bit almost of a different need because sometimes the acoustics can really control the sound. So on a phone call, when you're on your cell phone talking to somebody, they're going to have great clarity because there's not going to be background noise. And any sound that would be bouncing off the walls is being controlled. Similar goes for a virtual meeting, except that it almost can feel a little bit too controlled if there's too much acoustics. It's this sort of, how does the technology interact with the sound? Because technology has been built and designed to kind of address those natural environments. And maybe that's a factor of sort of how we have noise canceling now. Is there, in the future, is there some sort of an audio that is, you select a button to improve acoustics where it can detect and improve your voice clarity? So I think that really goes back to how is the space functioning. The current meeting room that I'm in right now is drywall walls. There's a little bit of a glass front, mostly the door with a side light, and the only acoustics in the space are an acoustic cloud above my head with ACT tile, which would be a high quality ceiling tile, and then 2 acoustic light fixtures. So right above me, the sound that's traveling up is sort of getting softened at the height of where it might be traveling to. But because this room's a little bit larger, the transfer of the sound of my voice isn't bouncing off a wall back into my computer. Whereas if you're in a smaller space, a 5 by 5 foot room or a 4 by 4 foot room, you're going to get your voice bouncing off the wall in front of you behind your computer, likely, and just causing less than ideal sound. So those rooms are usually beneficial from an acoustic perspective. But again, it's really where I think that the Hush acoustic analysis service can really support that to see how the space is performing. Again, from a budget perspective and a performance perspective, if you're applying too much acoustic treatment, it can feel, we would think that that's beneficial, but sometimes it's actually detrimental because it just really deadens the sound and it becomes almost a little bit distracting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that brings us to the end of our session. I don't think we have any questions, but before I actually wrap it up, you can actually use the networking tab down below, and you can connect with Kayla on LinkedIn and also other participants from the event. So please do use that opportunity. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you found our discussion both insightful and inspiring. And if you have any questions or need any further assistance, feel free to reach us at hello@hushacoustics.ca. And thank you and have a great day. Thanks.